We've only got a few days left before September, and this is genuinely the most important few weeks of the entire year for your lawn. What you do over the next couple of weekends decides whether your lawn thrives all through fall or starts falling apart on you as soon as the weather turns. Most people have no idea any of this stuff even matters until it's already too late. So today I'm going to walk you through the exact 11 tips that keep your lawn thick, green, and thriving through the whole fall season, even if this is your first fall taking care of a lawn. I know 11 tips sounds like a lot when you're just getting into lawn care, but honestly, it's easier than it sounds. A few of these are optional, depending on where you live and what kind of grass you have, and I'll flag those clearly as we go. The rest are small weekend jobs that cost you almost nothing, and I've put them in the exact order a professional would do them in. Your soil is still warm from all that heat, but the air is finally cooling off, and that combination of warm ground with cool air is the single best growing condition your grass will see all year. So the first tip is to give your lawn a good fall fertilizer at the end of August or the very first few days of September. This first feeding wants to be a balanced fertilizer, which just means it contains all three of the main nutrients you'll see on every bag, which are nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Beginners usually see the three numbers on the front of the bag and freeze up, so keep it simple by looking for a bag where all three numbers are present and reasonably close to each other. The reason we want phosphorus in the mix right now is that fall is when your grass wants to build roots, and phosphorus is the nutrient that supports that root growth. If you want to keep things gentle on your lawn early in the season, reach for a natural or organic fertilizer, because those rely on the microbes in your soil to break them down slowly, which makes them almost impossible to burn your lawn with. Later in fall, as the soil cools down, you'll switch over to something faster acting. But for this first feeding, you just want to keep it balanced and easy. The mistake I see beginners make all the time is dumping the full bag rate that the manufacturer prints on the label. So you're almost always better off rounding that number down and putting a lighter dose out every couple of weeks through fall instead of one huge dose that overwhelms the whole lawn. Tip number 2 is the one with the tightest deadline of anything on the whole list, because now we're going to overseed your thin and bare spots. Your lawn took a real beating this summer from heat, drought, foot traffic, and probably a little disease. So right now you've got thin patches and bare spots where the grass just gave up on you. The best time in the entire year to fix that by throwing down fresh seed is right now, roughly the middle of August through the middle of September, and no other time of year comes close. Your soil is still warm enough to germinate seed within a matter of days. The cooler air that follows is perfect for baby grass to grow without getting scorched, and there are almost no weeds germinating this time of year to steal space from your new seedlings. To do this correctly, you want to mow the area a little shorter than usual and bag the clippings. Then rake the bare spots to rough up the surface so the seed has real dirt to grab onto. Spread your seed at the rate written on the bag and keep the top inch of soil consistently moist until that seed sprouts. If you're a beginner picking a seed for the very first time, know that Kentucky bluegrass is slower to germinate than perennial ryegrass or turf-type tall fescue. So the further into September you get, the more you'll want to lean toward one of those faster options. Please remember what I said about tip 7, because if you overseed this weekend, you cannot put down a weed pre-emergent this fall, or you will kill every seed you just planted. Move 3 is aerating your compacted soil. And this pairs so well with overseeding that a lot of pros just do them on the same weekend. After a summer of every footstep, every mower pass, and the sun baking your yard hard for months, your soil is squeezed tight, and compacted soil is a serious problem because water, air, and nutrients simply cannot get down to the roots. Your grass is basically suffocating, no matter how much you feed it or water it. There is a really easy diagnostic that costs you nothing, and that is the screwdriver test. Grab any ordinary screwdriver from your toolbox and try to push it straight into your lawn. If it slides in with no fight, your soil is fine. But if you have to lean on it and it barely goes in, your soil is compacted and screaming for aeration. Core aeration pulls thousands of small plugs of soil out of your lawn, which opens the whole thing up and lets it breathe again. The pro move here is to aerate first and then overseed right after, because every one of those little holes becomes a perfect pocket for a grass seed to fall into, which gives you the seed to soil contact that is the whole secret to good germination. This is one of the more optional tips on today's list, so if you don't have the time or the budget, don't feel guilty skipping it. If you do want to do it, you can rent a machine from most local hardware stores for the day, or you can hire out a local company that will do the whole yard for a very reasonable price. That little combo of aerating and then overseeding together on the same weekend is honestly the perfect example of what most of lawn care really comes down to, which is knowing the right move at the right time rather than spending more money on fancy products you don't fully understand yet. That's exactly why I put together my book, Fix Your Lawn in 30 Days. Because most folks I talk to are honestly worn out from spending money on fertilizer that never seems to work, and worn out from watching the same weeds come back every single spring. If that sounds like you, this book is the plan you've been missing, because it tells you exactly what to do, what to buy, and when to put it down. Scan the QR code on the screen, or click the link in the description to grab your copy over at fixyourlawnin30days.com and finally transform your lawn. Coming into tip number 4, we're going to run a dethatcher over the lawn, which some people call a power rake or a scarifier. Thatch is a word that trips beginners up all the time, so let me clear it up quickly. Thatch is a thin layer of dead roots and stems that builds up right at the soil surface over time, and it breaks down way slower than the regular grass leaves you cut off every week. A little bit of thatch is fine and even helpful, but once it gets too thick, it starts blocking water and air from reaching the soil underneath. Running a dethatcher across your yard scrapes up a huge amount of that dead material and pulls it to the surface where you can rake it up and be done with it. If you're planning to overseed this weekend, dethatching first is a huge advantage because it opens the surface up and gives your seed direct contact with real soil. This is another one of the optional tips, especially if you have a bunch type grass like tall fescue that doesn't really build up thatch. If you have Kentucky bluegrass, creeping red fescue, or any of the warm season grasses that spread sideways, this is a really good time to do it while your lawn has plenty of season left to recover. Tip 5 is going after your broadleaf weeds right now, because fall is genuinely the single most effective time of year to kill them, and beginners almost never realize this. Think about a dandelion in your yard in early fall for a second. All summer long, that dandelion has been busy pushing energy up into its leaves and flowers, but as soon as it senses winter coming, it flips into survival mode and starts shoving all of its stored energy and sugars down into that deep taproot to save up for the cold months ahead. When you spray that weed right now with a broadleaf weed killer, whatever you put on those leaves gets carried down along with all those sugars and ends up right in the root, which kills the whole plant from the bottom up. If you tried to kill that exact same dandelion in spring, the plant would be pushing energy upward instead of downward. So your product would fight against the natural flow of the plant and often just burn the top while the root survives to regrow again. Same weed and same product, but a totally different result because of nothing more than timing. My advice for beginners is to spot spray instead of blanket spraying your whole yard, because you can walk around with a small handheld sprayer and just hit the weeds you actually see, which saves you money and keeps the rest of your lawn safer. Tip 6 is only for you if you're already seeing signs of grub damage, and it's optional for everyone else. Grubs are the little beetle larvae that live in your soil and eat grass roots, and the classic sign of a real infestation is an irregular brown patch of lawn that lifts right up off the ground like a piece of carpet because the roots underneath have been chewed through. Ideally, you would have prevented grubs back in May or June with a preventative product, but a lot of people simply don't get around to it and end up with damage showing up in September. I'll be honest with you about my own opinion here, because I personally do not put grub killers on my lawn since they are pretty harsh chemicals, and I would rather live with a small dead spot and prevent them properly next spring. If you don't want to deal with a dead patch though, you should absolutely hit them now, because I promise you, any grub that is chewing your lawn up in September is going to be right there in the spring, chewing more of it up and laying more eggs for next year's problem. If any of this timing is starting to click for you, doing me a favor and tapping the like button really does help this video reach the next beginner before their own window closes on them, and that is all I'll ask. Now we've made it to tip number 7, which is the one I've been warning you about since the top of the video. And I need you to pay extra attention here, because this single mistake ruins more beginner lawns than almost anything else on the list. Around September, depending on where you live, you'll want to think about putting down a winter pre-emergent, which is a product that stops weed seeds from germinating in your soil over fall and winter. The main target for most people is a nasty little weed called Poa annua, which is an annual bluegrass that becomes really obvious in spring because it wakes up before your regular grass and shows up as ugly pale green clumps everywhere. Pre-emergents work by creating a chemical barrier in the top layer of your soil that stops any seed from sprouting through it. That is exactly where the mistake happens, because your fresh grass seed is also a seed. So if you put a pre-emergent down on ground where you just planted grass, every single one of those seeds will die in the dirt without ever coming up. It works the other way too, since putting pre-emergent down first and then trying to seed on top of it means the seeds still won't germinate. The simple rule to remember for this year is that you either overseed or you put down a pre-emergent, but you never do both in the same fall unless you can physically keep them in totally separate zones of the yard. If you overseeded this year and you're feeling bad about skipping the pre-emergent, don't. You can pick it back up next fall, and the trade-off of a thicker lawn from overseeding is more than worth it. If you didn't seed, go ahead and put your pre-emergent down around September, and you'll thank yourself when spring rolls around and your yard is not full of that ugly pale weed grass. Tip 8 is one that beginners forget about all the time, and it is simply to keep mowing regularly through fall. There's a real mental trap that hits people once the weather cools off because it starts to feel like the growing season is over and it's time to put the mower away for the year. The exact opposite is actually true, since this is prime growing season for your cool season grass, and it can genuinely be growing faster right now than it did all summer long. Keep to a schedule of 1 or 2 mows per week through this entire window, and remember the general rule of never cutting off more than 1/3 of the blade in a single mow. If your trees start dropping leaves during this stretch, you don't necessarily need to rake them up if you stay on top of your mowing, because you can just run the mower right over them and mulch the leaves back into the lawn as free fertilizer. That is one of my favorite little beginner tricks, since it saves you hours of raking and actually feeds your grass at the same time. Moving to tip 9, you also need to keep watering your lawn deep into fall, and this is another place where beginners quit way too early. Since the weather feels cooler and things stay damp longer, it is really tempting to turn off the sprinklers or stop dragging the hose out. Your lawn still needs consistent deep watering, though, and by deep I mean watering long enough for the moisture to soak down 3 or 4 inches into the soil, which is where your grass roots actually live. You want your lawn to eventually go dormant on its own timing because of shorter days and colder temperatures, and you never want it to go dormant early just because you starved it of water. Keep your watering going all the way through October and into early November in most parts of the country, and back off gradually as the temperatures actually start dropping toward freezing. Tip 10 follows right on the heels of that, because as we push from late October into November, you're going to start bringing your mowing height down. The mistake beginners make is either leaving the grass tall all winter or scalping it down to the dirt in one weekend, and both of those cause real problems next spring. The correct approach is to step the height down gradually across your last few mows of the season, dropping the deck 1 notch each cut until you finish the year with a nice short lawn. The reason we want it short going into winter comes down to snow and ice sitting on tall grass, which flops the blades over into a wet mat that becomes the perfect breeding ground for a fungal disease called snow mold. Snow mold stunts your lawn coming out of winter and slows down that gorgeous early spring green up that you're working so hard to earn. Even in the southern parts of the country where snow isn't really a factor, keeping your dormant lawn short still protects it from being damaged during the long dormant stretch. Which brings us to tip 11, and this is honestly the cheapest and highest value feed of your entire lawn year, so please do not skip it. This last one is called your winterizer feed, and you'll put it down right when your lawn has essentially stopped growing but is still holding on to its green color, which is usually somewhere around the middle of November for most of the country. The benefit of this feed is that your grass is done actively growing at this point, but the roots are still awake and hungry, so they pull the fertilizer up out of the soil and then hold on to it through the entire winter. When spring finally shows up, your lawn already has a full tank of fuel loaded and ready to go, so it explodes out of dormancy while your neighbors are still staring at brown grass in April. For this specific feed, you want a quick-release nitrogen fertilizer, ideally one that also has a good amount of potassium, which you'll see on the bag as the 3rd number in the sequence. Ammonium sulfate is a great choice here because it is water-soluble and plant-available the second you put it down, which matters because the soil is too cold at this point for the microbes that break down organic fertilizers. To pull the whole plan together so it sits in your head clearly, before September closes on you, you feed the lawn with a balanced fall fertilizer, you overseed your thin and bare spots, you aerate the compacted soil if you can, you dethatch to open the surface up, you kill your broadleaf weeds while their roots are pulling all your product down into them, you handle grubs if you're already seeing damage, and you pick either overseeding or a pre-emergent for the season, but never both. From there, you keep mowing on a regular schedule, you keep watering deep, you stair-step your mowing height down through October and November, and you finish the year with that final winterizer feed in mid-November. That is the whole game plan. And honestly, it's one solid weekend of work up front, followed by knowing what's coming next. The one big thing I want you to take away from all of this is that your spring lawn is not actually made in spring. The lawn that your neighbor brags about next May is being built right now, in these few weeks before September closes on all of us. The people with the great yards are not luckier than you, and they didn't spend more money on fancy products. They just showed up and did the right jobs in the right window while everyone else had mentally checked out of lawn care for the year. Your lawn runs on a calendar, and that calendar does not wait for you or ask you nicely. No amount of hard work in April fully makes up for what you skipped in September, so please don't let this window slide by you. Show up over the next few weekends, work through these 11 moves at your own pace, and next spring, your lawn will do the bragging for you. Now I want to hear from you. Let me know in the comments what you're planning on doing with your lawn, and hit the subscribe button while you're there. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.